Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
One of the things I've always said about being a professional, you're an attorney, you're an accountant, you're an architect, you're a coach, you're a consultant, whatever it is that you face a tremendous dilemma. And what that tremendous dilemma is this, is you need to somehow or another communicate to the world that you're an expert. Because nobody wants to hire the mid-level heart surgeon, or if you're going to court and need representation for a criminal matter, you really want the best. And so as a professional, you need to somehow communicate to the world that you are the best. Here's the dilemma. The moment you proclaim yourself to be the best, you are automatically disqualified. Because obviously somebody who needs to say they're the best can't possibly be the best. And I'm going to tell you right now, as a former attorney, there's a lot of truth to that. The people who said they were the best were anything but. So that really creates a dilemma. And one way of getting around that dilemma is to get out there and give programs, write articles, write a book, all sorts of stuff. Recently, what's come about, well, not recently, it's been around for a while, but people are capitalizing on is podcasting. Today, I have Carl Richards on here with me, and he has spent more than 25 years behind the microphone, on radio, on stage, entertaining and influencing audiences worldwide. That's worldwide, excuse me. He's a 3-time best-selling author. He's a TEDx speaker, MC, the host of Communication Connection Community, the Podcasters Podcast, and he is the founder and CEO of Podcast Solutions Made Simple. So he helps coaches and consultants, other subject matter experts, attorneys, accountants, architects, insurance agents, helps them become the go-to expert and elevate their credibility by launching their very own world-class podcast. He lives in Eastern Ontario, Thousand Islands area, if you're familiar with it. I'll let you pronounce the city name. And he enjoys camping and boating in those Thousand Islands. Are there truly 1,000 islands?
Actually, it's funny, Frank. There are 1,800 islands in the Thousand Islands. I don't know where they got the number. I think they got to 1,000 and said, we'll just say it's 1,000 islands, but we'll keep counting just to be sure we get the right number.
Well,
that's how they did it.
Well, that's like the state of Minnesota. It's called the land of 10,000 lakes, and it's supposedly more than 10,000 lakes. So
okay, all right.
But sue me, right? Okay, there's not 1,000 islands. Somebody sue me.
I think it's because there's over 1,000, maybe, is what they're going for.
Yeah. It sounds better. It sounds better than 1,833 islands. Anyhow,
and I can never remember the exact number. And with the water levels, it changes, right?
Oh, there you go.
Year to year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, welcome. You're not a stranger to podcasting. You do podcasting, which always is a treat for me because, well, it's a little nerve-wracking too, because I'm afraid I'm going to screw up. Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. But I guess the quick story, how you got into this, and then let's really kind of dive into really how this is just a wonderful way for people to can get themselves networked, to build connections with people, to be the expert, build trust.
Well, it's interesting because you started off very strong by indicating the number of years I've been in radio. When I hear that, I go, was it really 25 years? It pretty much was. Between radio gigs, because they say you haven't made it in radio until you've been fired from at least one radio job. So I was. So yay, I made it.
Yeah.
As a successful broadcaster to be fired. And I was looking for something to do. And podcasting wasn't even on my radar. But I thought, you know what? After a couple of people saying, you're good at speaking. And I was in Toastmasters at the time too. They said, you're good at speaking. You're good at evaluations. You won speech contests. Why don't you do speaker training? And I thought, well, that'll be interesting. So I tried doing that. And like anyone else that starts a business, it's just started out really slow. And then I guess about the second year in, Frank, somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, you're doing the speaker training thing. You should do a podcast." Now, keep in mind, this is around 2012. I had no idea what a podcast was. I couldn't conceptualize what it was. And even after they explained it, I scratched my head and said, I have no idea what this is. Why would me, as a speaker trainer who's helping people get on physical stages, want to help people get on some pseudo radio thing? So I dismissed it. 5 years later, I'm at an event in Toronto. It's the Real Estate Investors Expo. They've got some main stage speakers, one of which was Tony Robbins, by the way. And then they've got some other speakers in breakout rooms. And the breakout rooms were anywhere from, you could get 100 people in them to 1,000 people, depending on the size of the breakout room. So I go in one that's about 200 people. And there's a guy by the name of Sam Crowley who started podcasting when podcasts were still in diapers. Okay?
Yeah.
And he says, you can start a podcast. Basically, his whole 90-minute shtick was how everyone has a podcast in them, just like everyone has a book in them, that whole concept.
Yeah.
And by the end of the session, he's saying, okay, if you're ready to start a podcast, I've got this program, take this program. It's going to help you get started. It'll be the fast start to getting your podcast. And after that 90 minutes, I knew, and I had a better understanding of what a podcast was and that I needed one. And then I took another 18 months to figure out what to do because I didn't take Sam's program.
Right.
And then I finally realized that, okay, well, this is a good place to be. This is not only is this good for a speaker, and I did my research, I did my homework. A lot of speaker trainers out there in Canada and the US already had podcasts. I'm like, okay, I'm in good company. The people who are putting their shingle out there saying, I'm an expert, I'm the best at, as you said, they have podcasts. Who knew? So I felt like I was in really good company. And I started to ask this question, why don't other people know about this? Why aren't other entrepreneurs, accountants, architects, attorneys, why aren't they doing this? So I started to conceptualize this whole thing. And then COVID hit. And that's when my career, because I'd gotten back into radio at a period of time, I'd gotten back into radio, some great opportunities. That's when my career dried up again. And I realized this is a time to pivot my speaker training business that was not happening because nobody was getting on physical stages.
Right.
But people are looking to get on virtual stages. And how do I fit into this? How can I help people? So that's sort of how I got into it, got into podcasting. And then how I got into the podcasting space as a trainer and facilitator and also running an agency was because of this global pandemic. And where it's taken me has been phenomenal.
Well, I think the whole notion of podcasting, I started in 2018. I want to say there was 400,000 podcasts, maybe 500,000.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, now it's probably 4 or 5 times that. And you would think that there would be some sort of saturation point, and there will be. There always is a saturation point, but I don't think we're really anywhere close to it. People are putting out good content. My wife and I, we talk about we go on long trips. We'll listen to longer format podcasts, and it's like, it's really a means of saving the world, because if you're relying on print media, if you're relying on broadcast media, you get 30-second sound bites of, whatever's happening in the Canadian elections or the US elections or, world events, and you're not really getting the details. That's, and I'm not getting political about it, but there's just so much information that you don't really have an opportunity to get at otherwise. So
there's a ton of information out there, but you're right. I think in the conventional media sense, I think that the conventional media that did it best was print, because print could give you the full story. You just had to read all the way to the end to get to the full story, including the color of the sky that day, that whatever happened, right? But you're right, the little snippets of information that we get from radio and television, and I think that's part of the reason why we're moving away from it, that and the fact that we're in an on-demand world. We want to absorb content when we want it. We're very busy. We can't wait for the top of the hour or this time to do this. We want to do it when it fits into our daily lives. So that's where I think we're seeing some of the shift. Plus the fact that we get a bigger story or a different perspective when it's presented in a podcast form, or we get a more investigative report, or we get a a different perspective than we would say from a journalistic standpoint. So
Right.
there's many different reasons for that, but for sure, the fact that to your example, that you can be on a long road trip and listen to long form content, or you know what, if you're only out for a 20-minute walk or a 20-minute run, you can listen to 20 minutes of content, right? So that's
Yeah.
the other thing, is there's no rules. Although I think we'll probably get some eventually, but there's no rules, because it's still, even though it's been around for over 20 years, it's still, to your point, it's not saturated yet. And there's still a lot of opportunity for growth and development in the industry and for people that want to get into it.
Well, and there are so many different topics out there.
Oh, yeah.
So I could say, okay, you know what, I really want to delve into this one particular whatever it is. And I can find a podcast on it, you know, and it might be, there was a infamous murder here in Ohio, in the United States. 8 family members killed. It looked like a mafia hit, right? You know, and then you learned it, well, it was really a rival family that did it, you know, which that's what you got in the news, and that was it. It's like, oh, you know, okay, you want to know more, but you're not going to get it from the news, you know. And lo and behold, there's a podcast out there that walked you through every, you know, everybody's story, you know, the culprits, you know, the families, it's like, man, this is amazing. But anyhow, let's get back to, you know, kind of what I said earlier, and really what you're about is helping professionals, if you will, experts out there, really display their expertise. Did you just naturally kind of fall into that, or was it, are you that smart?
Frank, I'm that smart. The
Okay.
end. Mic drop. No, I'm not naturally that smart. I think that's the point, though, is I think we're constantly evolving.
Yeah.
So when I first started on this road of speaker training, I knew nothing about speaker training. Zero. All I knew was somebody said, you know what, you're good in Toastmasters. You're good in that arena. You're good at speaking. You're good at giving evaluations. Why don't you do speaker training? In order for me to be a speaker trainer, and a good one, I had to take additional training. I had to learn from other speaker trainers how to be a speaker trainer, and therefore also learn how to speak. So I think that when you do something, it's the old adage of, even the best coaches have coaches, because they know that they don't know. They know that they don't know it all.
Yeah.
Or they know what they don't know, or something along those lines. I'll let you figure out what I actually meant when I said that.
Well, we're horrible. We do a horrible job of being self-aware, but we can't see the water we're swimming in, and so we're making horrible mistakes, and maybe not horrible, but we're missing little things, and it's not that we're dumb. We just can't see what's going on around us.
So I think what I realized when I stepped into the podcast arena was, and this is around the time that Facebook was, we started to see more Facebook Lives. And you saw 2 kinds of Facebook Lives. You saw the ones that were in the moment. Sometimes it was people having fun, and other times it was business owners trying to do something. It's like the throwing spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, that type of thing. So you saw that, but you also saw people that were doing it with purpose. And I was attracted to the people who were doing it with purpose. And I started doing Facebook Lives, and I actually did a presentation on it. You know, really why your business needs, why you should be doing Facebook Lives, you know, why every business owner should be doing them. It was probably my first inception into the podcasting space, was that putting out the best version of yourself. So I didn't fall into this. I think it took years of figuring out that if you want to put your best foot forward, you really need to, firstly, you need to do it, but then you also need to give yourself the opportunity to learn what it is that you don't know, so you can put that version of yourself forward. For me, it was, again, in the earlier days, it was the speaker training, the speaking. And then as I got good at that, I could share that with people. I could give them now information from experience, not just in Toastmasters, but from experience of speaking on stages in front of 50 people, 100 people, 600 people. I could give them that experience. I could give them information. I could give them the knowledge, and I could give them the hope or the encouragement that they can do this too. Same in the podcasting space. Once I realized that this is something that, and why don't more people know about this? This is a viable tool, and knowing the power of not only the power of audio, but and this is as video is starting to become popular too, but the power of video. There's an opportunity here to help people level up their marketing game. Because at this point, people were trying to do anything and everything that they could to make their marketing stick. They're doing different social media posts. They're getting on this. They're still trying to do live events. They're trying to figure out what the fit is. And I realized that at one point, a podcast just made sense. It's kind of like at some point, if you're high enough up the professional chain or thought leader, you know that it's time to write a book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing. You know that if you're, mid six figures and beyond that, you should have a podcast. If you don't, call me. Frank will give you my number.
Yeah.
My email address. But if you're not quite there, maybe you should be guesting on podcasts and putting your expertise out there so people get to know who you are. That's the thing. In 2024, the recording of this episode, people want to know that you're the real deal. They want that social proof. They want to know, like, and trust you. They can't know, like, and trust you if they don't know who you are, number one. And if they don't know what you do or anything about what you're all about, and they're only seeing social posts every 6 months because that's how it hits the algorithm, how do they know? Whereas in the podcasting arena, you can really streamline it and focus exactly on who you want to get your messaging to. And that didn't come overnight. That took years of practice and failing forward to figure out what's the best way to do this. And there are agencies that have been doing this since, and again, there's an evolution of this, but there are agencies that have been doing this for quite a while.
Yeah.
But certainly there's that opportunity though still to put this version of yourself out there that maybe you haven't even considered doing yet.
Well, my 2 cents is, and you've written a number of books. I've written books. Podcasting is way easier. That's my feeling. You can get your personality across. I like to joke around, and that's not going to come through in a book.
Yeah, it's true.
I can cover a greater variety of material. I just think there's a lot of reasons why it's easier than writing a book, and people, that's where a lot of people's default is. Well, I got to write a book. And the nice thing about a book, I guess, is that it's lasting, whereas a podcast isn't. But
well, I'm going to argue that point because it can be lasting. We just don't know how long lasting it's going to be.
No, you're right.
But there's definitely some longevity in the work, as long as you don't hit delete, right, or allow it to lapse. But I think you're right, and I think it's because what's happened is we've been programmed for the last, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years. If you're an expert, write a book. Think back of the radio days in the 80s, where if you wanted to find out who the top people were in the world who were writing books, they were on the radio.
Yeah.
They weren't hosting radio shows, but they were invited to be on radio programs, or they were invited to be on television programs. Well, now if they're still writing books, they either have a podcast, or they're being invited, or they realize that that's where they should be, because it's an extension of their expertise. But you're absolutely right, Frank. It's so much easier to bring your personality forward and your intellectual property through the spoken word than it is through the written word. With the written word, there's so many different rules. I am a very surprise, having worked in radio, I'm a very conversational writer.
Right.
There's a way to write conversationally, and there's a way to have a book printed so it sounds like you're conversational. Two very different things. Because I was taught in the radio days how to write for the ear as opposed to writing for the eye. Well, when you're reading a book, even if it's conversational, it's still gone through variations of editing that it needs to go through in order for you, the reader, to digest it easier.
Yeah.
Whereas a podcast, you and I having a conversation just like this, people are going to hear it as a conversation because that's what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Right? So yeah.
Let me tee you up with this, because I have this conversation from time to time with people. I'll tell people, you know what, you really ought to have a podcast. You really ought to have a podcast. It's a great way to get your expertise out there. And this is the response I get, and I want you to kind of retort to it. I believe you'll have a retort to it. No, Frank, I just want to be on other people's podcasts.
Okay. I love that. I love it.
What I mean, what do you?
And what's my response?
Yeah,
Okay, you know what? You know what? It's true. There is definitely a benefit to being out there and being on other people's podcasts. I consider that the starting position. You want to test the waters of this podcasting thing, go and be on other people's podcasts. Two things will happen. Number one, you'll get your expertise out there. It'll elevate your credibility a little bit. Me being on Frank's podcast, it's phenomenal. It's a great opportunity. Frank, I'm glad you invited me. If you hadn't, we'd still be friends, right?
Yeah. No.
We'd still connect on some level. Here's the thing though. How much of my IP, how much of my intellectual property, how much of who I am and what I believe in can I put forward in 20 or 30 minutes on Frank's podcast? Not much. And Frank, for that matter, might even say, oh, Carl, you know what? I want to have you on my show, but I don't want you to talk about X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Don't pitch anything. Don't sell me anything. Don't offer a product or service. Just tell me a bit of your story. Well, that's fine, but I really want this to work for me for business. I want more of my ideal client, Frank. That's why I'm in this podcasting space. Sorry, Carl, that's my rule. Whereas if you have your own podcast, guess what? You make the rules. Yeah. It's your show. You decide what it is that you want to do with that show. If you want to do a show that, as Frank, you mentioned earlier, about true crime, for example, well, then you do a show about true crime. If that's in your wheelhouse, you want to do a show about business, do a show about business. If you're a faith-based person, you want to do a faith-based or something about spiritualism, do that. You want to do a health and wellness podcast, do that. But you can't do that the way you want to on someone else's show. It's like if you were to go on Oprah Winfrey's show, when she had a show, if you were to go on Oprah Winfrey's show, it wouldn't be Carl Richards with special host Oprah Winfrey. No, it would be Oprah Winfrey with special guest Carl Richards, and I'd have to fit within what Oprah wanted to talk about. By the way, I was never on her show. Just saying. Same type of thing with a podcast. So you're handcuffed to whatever the host's goal of that show is. So if you really want to level up, you really want your credibility, the person you are to come forward, having your own show is always going to be better than just guesting on other people's shows. It's kind of like this. I've contributed a chapter to several different books, which allows me to say that I'm a published author.
Sure.
They've even been best-selling books. Guess what? I'm a best-selling author. Isn't that great? But if those books aren't mine, I can only lay claim to a small portion of that. But now all of a sudden I have a best-selling book. I can now say, here's my book. Here's my information. And I think people maybe understand it in the print version a little bit easier because there are so many compilations, Frank, out there now, as you're very well aware. But that's the key difference is if it's your show, you have control. You have carte blanche to do whatever you want on your show. When you're on somebody else's show, you're at the mercy of the host every single time.
Yeah, I've been on programs and they've never dropped. Never dropped. You know, it's just it's annoying. There's nothing I can do. Yeah, I think people are better. You know, even if it's like, I'm going to do one episode a month, right? I'm just, that's pretty low bar. But yeah, I'm obviously a fan of podcasting. I like being on people's podcasts, but I'm a fan of having people having their own podcasts and getting their own voice out there. Let's shift gears here. Let's talk about Carl. Let's talk about podcast solutions made simple. things you do, how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah. We started in 2020, as I said, the end of 2020, and we started out doing a lot of training, and then that shifted to doing a lot of one-on-one work with clients who basically came to me. They were people in my program who said, "Carl, I love this course that you're offering. Can you do the work for me?" And I was, "Sure, I can do that. Problem." And then we shifted to do a lot of agency work. That's why we love to work with people one-on-one and help them launch their shows, Frank, like, just like you're doing. But then we realized that we really want to keep that education piece strong. So we've actually gone back to, as well as just doing the agency work, we're also getting back into boot camps, full 8-week programs, trainings, meetups, and things like that. And I always invite people to connect with me to see if they're a fit to either come to one of my events, one of my meetups, come to one of my boot camps, because you never know when the rubber's going to hit the road, and you realize that this is for me. It's either an opportunity for community, to be a part of a community, or to connect up to see if podcasting is the space where you want to be. podcastsolutionsmadesimple.com. If you go to the Book Me page, you'll find out there's a little questionnaire there to walk you through to see if we're a good fit to at least have a conversation. And then we go from there. And like I said, we're really focusing on events and getting the right information out there. You can go to the World Wide Web. I haven't heard it called that in a while, so I thought I'd turn that phrase again. You can go to the internet and you can learn how to do everything on the internet, or you can ask an expert.
Yeah,
I'll let you define the expert thing again, Frank, but no, seriously. Or you ask somebody who's been there and done that. I'm the been there, done that guy. I'm the been there, done that, doing it all the time, helping people all the time in the podcasting space, because there is so much information out there about podcasting, but that means there's so much misinformation out there about podcasting. And I want to make sure that you get on the right path if this is exactly where you want to be. So reach out, go to the website. You'll find some information there. You'll find our podcast there, all kinds of information to know if this is where you want to go.
Well, and you said it early on. You were sold on podcasting, but it took you 18 months to get there. I think that was the number, because you tried to go it alone, whereas you could have probably been ready in 18 days if you would have just.
I tried to go rogue, and I thought, again, this is me as a broadcaster.
Right.
I know how to talk. I know how to edit audio. What else is there to learn? There's a lot of things that you don't realize. And it's not that it's hard. It's that when you don't know what you don't know. We've heard that before. So I can certainly shorten that journey for you, and also make sure that you're on the right path so you achieve the goals that you want to achieve with your podcast, because everyone comes at this for a different reason. For some, it's to elevate their credibility. For some, it's to bring forward their passion project. For some, it's a hobby. For others, it's, I'd like to bring more revenue or more of the right client into my business. So that's why. And then, of course, there's all the back end stuff. And if you're wanting to learn all of that, that's part of our programs that I mentioned. But if you want to do this and you don't want to do all the back end work, that's one of the things we can do for you. But you don't know if you don't pick up the phone. There's showing my age. If you don't reach out and say, "Hey, tell me more about this."
Yep.
I want to know if it's a fit for me.
I appreciate your time on here. I think this is this will be helpful for a lot of people.
Thanks, Frank. I'm blessed that you had me here.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today, and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.